Hello and welcome to the
Hello and
two-man
welcome to
power
the
trip of
two-man
wrestling. I am
power
your
trip of
host,
wrestling. I am your
JP
host,
John
JP
Poz.
John Poz.
With me today's special
With
guest,
me
he
today's
is
special
known as the
guest, he is
Collector,
known as
the
the
Predator, the
Collector,
former
the Predator, the
UPW
former
heavyweight
UPW
champion,
heavyweight
Mr.
champion,
Sylvester
Mr.
Terkay.
Sylvester
Sylvester, welcome to the
Terkay.
two-man
Sylvester,
power
welcome
trip.
to
How you
the
doing?
two-man power trip. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
What is going on in your world?
What is going on in your world?
What's going on in the world? Oh, it's just a slow, cold autumn day in Pennsylvania. It's warmed up, one of the nicer days that we're going to have for the rest of the year, I think. So just doing things like getting leaves sucked up and cleaned up and getting the yard ready for winter. And other than working out and running my errands on a Friday, pretty simple stuff. Pretty simple stuff. Been selling those cars lately, and that's what I do.
Nice. So no wrestling
Nice.
or
So
fighting.
no wrestling or fighting,
cars.
but cars.
Right. Yeah. The wrestling and the fighting, that's kind of stuff that I can still talk about, but I don't do that much of. I was teaching mixed martial arts for about 5 years. I gave that up a couple years ago. But other than that, I can talk about it. I just don't get in the ring and do it anymore.
What about what you're currently
What
doing?
about
Is that
what you're
something that
currently doing? Is that something
that
that
you like more than
that
wrestling,
you
or
like
a
more than
different
wrestling, or
passion,
a different passion, or
just a completely different
just
lot
a
in life?
completely different lot in life?
It's a different type of life, a different situation. Obviously, when I got let go by World Wrestling Federation, I had already moved back to Pittsburgh, and I found myself, after I'd moved back about 4 months later, out of a job. And so I had decided I need to do something. I was laying around doing nothing a whole lot for the day, and I figured Japan would come calling, and they did not. So I figured, oh well, I'll take a chance and go apply for a job, and got it, and ended up doing pretty well with it. Then after that, Japan came calling, and obviously my manager Rick Bassman has been pretty good about giving me some movie parts here and there. And I ended up going back to Japan, several times a year, and my company was good enough to let me do that. So all the way to going to China to do a movie for about 3 weeks. But so I have a great employers, and they let me kind of go do what I need to do. But pro wrestling kind of became something that I did part time, and I got on with my life after that. I decided that I was going to go and move to Puerto Rico or move back to California. I came back here and made a different life for myself.
How do you like doing the movies?
How do you like doing the movies?
I always enjoyed movies. Movies, you feel you're at the top of the world. You get to do the things that you do well, especially the action fighting flicks and that sort of thing. I've always enjoyed the stunts. I've always enjoyed the challenge of it, to trying to make it look good, to hit your marks, to the timing of it all. Always liked commercial acting. All that. I had a passion for that before I had a passion for pro wrestling or pro fighting.
When you look at it, kind of
When
movies
you
and
look at it,
wrestling
kind of movies
kind of
and
go together,
wrestling
right? I mean,
kind of go together,
kinda
right? I mean, they kind of
share the same universe, share the
share
same
the same
world.
universe, share the same world.
Well, whenever I was doing the acting when I was in Los Angeles, it was good to learn the pro wrestling, because pro wrestling around that 1999 time frame, 2000, 2001, was really hitting its zenith. And I was finding myself, because I could do it and I could understand it, at least, I was getting more commercials and getting more theatrical roles. So it did help me. But it's a different thing. I mean, obviously you have to be cognizant of, on even commercial acting, theatrical acting, they're two different arenas, and you kind of got to learn each of them. But yeah, they're along the same lines. I mean, you have to find a way to be entertaining and to bring something to it that's different or unique. And I enjoyed the career I was having up until I got into pro wrestling, and then that was a whole different roller coaster in of itself.
Interesting, kind of before the
Interesting, kind of before the pro wrestling
the amateur wrestling
the
career,
amateur
is just
wrestling career
remarkable.
is just
NCAA
remarkable.
champion,
NCAA
ACC
champion, ACC champion.
I mean, just a great resume as far as
great
amateur
resume
wrestling,
as
right?
far as amateur wrestling, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of people would say that I overachieved a bit, but worked hard, and I was blessed with a great situation when I went to NC State at the time with the workout partners that I had, the coach that I had, and I just fit in there very well with how I saw things. There's a lot of other places I could have went to that probably I wouldn't have did as well, but I was blessed. I had a wonderful, unique situation down at NC State. Go Wolfpack. They have a great coach right now that's also doing very well and carrying the program well. But, I was thankful to have been a 3-time All-American and a national champion for them.
Love that you were on the Angle Doc.
That you were on the Angle Doc.
The Angle Doc, Kurt Angle Doc.
On Peacock, Kurt Angle Doc.
What was that like process?
What was that like process?
You had a feud in amateur wrestling with Kurt Angle.
Let's get you on to talk about it.
Well, anytime you compete, you have there's always that love-hate relationship type of thing. Obviously, you want to win. He wants to win. He did win. That sort of thing. We had close matches. I had a situation whenever the year before, I thought I had him caught in a finishing hold, but he yelled and he got out of the move, and then he went on to beat me. And so, but we're competitors. He's a competitor. I'm a competitor. And, as far as going and doing the documentary, I had no problem. I was gunning for him. I just couldn't quite figure out. I couldn't unlock the last piece of the puzzle. And he went on, became, the national champion that year. And I was the runner up, and I did it the following year. And, it's one of those things to where when I was asked to come and speak about it and everything, I was willing to, because, I felt that, it was time to, the things that he did well for me. I think he looked out for me in WWE. I think that he wanted good things to happen for me, that sort of thing. And so I figured that I would try and be, talk well about him and talk about, our situation, what we had built up. And, I had pinned everybody going into the finals. They didn't mention that. So that was pretty interesting. I pinned everybody in the first period in the whole tournament. And then, so that's why the big match was hyped up so much, and so, and he ended up beating me like 3-2, and he hit the move in the last couple seconds, and the rest is history. I wish I could change that on my end, but that's what happened. And but I'm better for it. I'm a better person for it. And so when I had the opportunity to go and speak about Kurt and talk about what a great athlete he was and everything, well, it's true, he is. And talk about our time together and our matches and the competitive nature of what we did at that time and around 91 and 92. So but I wished him well. He went on and did great things, and I had no problem telling the world that we had a great rivalry up through there.
Was there a lot of bad blood at that point?
Was there a lot of bad blood
when
at
you
that
guys
point?
Were kind of quote unquote
when you guys were kind of quote unquote feuding?
Just beat you because you guys were like the two big dogs.
You guys were like the two big dogs back then.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, we're from the same part of town. We're both from the Pittsburgh area. We didn't cross paths in high school. He went to Mount Lebanon, which is up the road a little bit. He was a heavyweight. I was, I think, a 67-pounder at the time, that sort of deal. We didn't cross paths. And then all of a sudden, I just kept hitting growth spurts. And here, I did well and became an All-American, and all of a sudden we were on the radar, and people were always like, "Hey, have you heard of Kurt Angle?" Of course, I heard of Kurt Angle, and I'm sure he got the same thing too. What about this guy? Or, have you wrestled him or this or that? But we eventually crossed paths, and like I said, we were both gunning for the same thing. You go there and you want to be a national champion, and you want to be an All-American, you want to be a national champion, you want to do the best you can. And so, is it bad blood? I know I would work my tail off to try and beat him. I think he probably did the same. But it's not like I hated the guy or had any other than a competitive spirit. I didn't want to lose to him. I didn't want to lose to anybody else. And that's probably could be the same said for him, I would think.
Transitioning from amateur wrestling to pro
what's
that like? Is that an easy jump?
Hard jump?
It's a hard jump. I think that in amateur wrestling, you find a way to make it happen, and it's there. And if you don't, then you just work harder. But I think that whenever you go into pro wrestling, you have to, there's a lot of other intangibles, and you start to figure them out, or you don't. It's like there's a Gable Stevenson, who was just, outstanding and athletic and talented and everything of that nature. I don't know. I'm not going to say one way or another, but just jumping, just because you're great in one doesn't necessarily you'll be, that it's going to transition into the next. You got to learn how to move and have your being within the company with other wrestlers, how to earn your respect, how to get your spot, how to keep your spot. And there's lots of things. WWE has its own way of doing things, its own politics, its own set of people you have to work with. Whenever I went to Japan and worked in 0-1, it's much different. There were a lot of guys that went over and didn't transition well into working that type of style. And with the company, several people, but they did better going over to WWE, and vice versa. So, it's, where you're going to get your push and who likes you and who's helping you. And sometimes I think it's if you're going to get an extra shot or two, sometimes you make a mistake, or, somebody has to say, well, we believe in him. We're going to give him another shot. We're going to stick by him, make it happen, instead of saying, well, I don't think he has it, or he's not going to transition, or I don't know, sometimes they start to have their doubts. So, yeah, it is hard. It is easy. It's. I wish it was easy to just jump over and everything that you do and everything you worked for. But it's about looking at the camera at the right time and realizing that you had a 10-minute match ready, and then all of a sudden it gets cut down to 6 on the fly. And how to make it look good, and how to, keep Vince happy, or, obviously when over in Japan, how to keep them happy, that sort of thing. So it was a challenge. I wish I could sit there and say, wow, the wrestling schools and places I've been to and everything where they try to help you learn to work the mic better and this and that, and give you your pushes and give you some matches and everything. You got to make the most of it, and hope that you just keep learning and they stick with you also, because sometimes they don't.
Were you always wanting to be a wrestler or no?
I never desired. I always enjoyed it growing up, going to watch it at the Civic Arena with my family. Then my oldest sister, would take me down to Wheeling whenever they started coming. It was Georgia Championship Wrestling, WCW, would come up as far as Wheeling, West Virginia, and we go down and watch them. So I enjoyed it. I grew up with it, and it was funny. A lot of the people that I grew up watching ended up being my bosses and the agents in WWE. But you go, and I thought that acting more so would be something that would be the thing that I would do very well at, and it ended up being that I had an opportunity to go to a wrestling school, pro wrestling school, and I kind of was skeptical. I think much in the same way Kurt was. It's like, well, I did the real thing. I'm a trained athlete. I did this and everything. I don't know if I could go and lower myself to do that type of thing. But once I went there, I found it challenging, and I gravitate toward a challenge and started picking up on it and everything, and had an opportunity to learn it, and then to get developmental contracts. I worked at Japan first, did a show for Antonio Inoki and his offshoot. It was called UFO. It was my first paying match, so to speak. And then when I came back, I had an offer from World Wrestling Federation for a developmental deal. So I took advantage of that and went down, left UPW where I had been learning, and went down to OVW to learn for nearly 2 years before I was let go.
When you do get official training, is that also Rick Bassman in UPW? Or is that OVW?
Well, Rick Bassman was UPW. He was the one that
he does your training.
He did my training initially, and obviously, Tom Howard, and we learned to take the bumps and the falls and do the moves and that sort of thing. And he provided venues for us to work at the Galaxy and small shows here and there and whatnot. And so, you learn and you get as much experience as you can. And then, when you have your opportunity to step into the bigger stage, you do. Obviously, I did get the opportunity to go work down in Louisville with Jim Cornette and Danny Davis, and that was OVW. And before me, it was Russ McCullough and Stephen Gamlin had went down before me. They got their contracts before me. And then I went down and, I commenced my training for, like I said, nearly the next 2 years down with them.
It's like a monster factory there. All these guys are like 6'6", 6'7", crazy.
Yeah, there were a lot of big guys, and obviously like Russ and Stefan were big guys. You had a lot of other big guys coming in there, and then you had guys that got sent down. I guess you would, to lose weight, kind of like punishment. You had Mark Henry come back down. You had the Big Show come down for a while. So you had a lot of big guys there and everything, and you're trying to fit into an organization that was really like homegrown and just it's local talent, and then all of a sudden now they have, these guys coming from all over the country with WWE contracts, trying to fit into TV, you're trying to fit into the storylines, you're trying to be liked by your new bosses. It had its own challenges too. You paid your dues. Obviously they reported back to WWE, and you were trying to keep your nose clean and look as though that you were making progress, and that you were there working hard and learning and had potential.
Looking at UPW, who are some of the guys you wrestled with and worked with and trained with there? John Cena, those guys?
Yes. Not so much. John Cena was a little bit. He came on, was coming on. I obviously knew him from he worked at Gold's Gym, and he came on, and he was the prototype there. And he was just having his first matches and stuff. It was interesting. And then whenever I got my developmental contract, that entailed me moving from California down to Louisville. And they were actually not sure for a while if they were going to have me move to Memphis at the time and go back and forth. And then it ended up being, there was some situations going on at Memphis down there. So they had me go to Louisville. But so I hadn't worked with John. He was still learning. He was a little bit behind in terms of, he still had, a good bit to go before they gave him a developmental deal, and he ended up going down. By the time I was getting ready to leave, he was coming down to OVW. So that was pretty interesting. But Samoa Joe, I worked with him a little bit, UPW, that sort of thing, obviously in practice and that and stuff whenever I came back. And he did some work in Japan, 0-1. So I would see him in that sort of thing. But I never really had like a match with him, so to speak. I knew him. He was on in some of the same venues and stuff, doing some work for Rick whenever Rick Bassman was still running shows for UPW and stuff. Whenever I had moved back to California after getting let go from OVW, then, we would run into each other and that sort of thing. But, so it just seems like I was a little bit before them and they did their thing a little bit after me and at different places where, I, was with 0-1 and then started doing some fighting for K1. They went on and they, got with either, one of the other pro wrestling companies in the United States, whether, where Samoa Joe went, or you actually ended up in WWE. But before that, with Kurt Angle at what A&E, what's the
TNA, yeah.
The other,
TNA, yeah.
TNA, I'm sorry, TNA, and then so. But different people, you find your way in and out of different organizations. You get let go by WWE and you go somewhere else, and sometimes you get re-signed, and and then sometimes you find yourself going to a different company, and it's a pretty transitory type of life.
When you look at 0-1 and going to Japan, what was that? Culture shock or no?
Culture shock or no?
It wasn't. I think the what Tom had helped me, Tom Howard, being teacher, and then I was just my look and everything, I had a lot of help whenever I went over. They wanted me to transition into more of a Bruiser Brody type of thing. It was like an honor to take on a moniker of someone who was famous before you. And so I did that, and let the hair grow out and had the chain and that type of thing. But I enjoyed it. I got to work with a company. It was, it treated me well. And you didn't feel like you were really competing with anybody else. I felt whenever I went to WWE, you're always kind of looking over your shoulder, or somebody else is looking over their shoulder at you. You might take their spot, or that sort of thing. And I felt like 0-1 found a way to make, everybody, even, whenever Nathan Jones was there, or Heinrich, or other different people, they found a way to find a spot, and it didn't really threaten you. You went and you did your thing, and they did their thing, and it worked. It was a season where they brought in a lot of gaijin, so to speak, a lot of foreigners to work the cards, and I think they had a lot of great success from that. You had the guys that were kind of funny, like the Steve Carinos. You brought in a lot of good guys that might not make to the next level, but were very good workers. I learned from them. You got to work with the best Japanese wrestlers, a lot of very talented guys that at the time you would think that they were, had 3 or 4 of the top 10 guys in the world, I would think. Guys like, Hashimoto and Shinjiro Otani and Masato Tanaka, and, even their young boys that were up and learning, they knew what they were supposed to do, and had a lot of respect. So I had a great time. It was a nice time to work with that organization and continue to learn, work in that style and what they wanted. And so, I can't say enough about it.
Hashimoto, one of the all-time greats.
What was it like working for him? What was it like working for him?
Just in general and working for that promotion.
Hashimoto was very good to me. He had taken me out to eat several times, and I mean, just one of those things, and gave me time and had a lot of respect for me. And here I am, still relatively new with less than 2 years of pro wrestling under my belt, and he's working main event matches with them and tag matches and everything. And so but yet he would listen to you. He would listen to what you had to say. And, he always said, my mind is like a computer, and he could really think of these things out, but he would always think about, he would take into what you wanted to do and that sort of thing. And he had a good, obviously, a wonderful mind for the business. But he still found a way to make you look good. And, was all very gracious. Always treated all his wrestlers very well. And I had that most respect for him. Whenever he had passed away, it was almost like, a member of my family, because he treated me that well. I had that much respect for him. I would, I have never said anything bad about him or his organization. And he took a chance on me. And that's one of those things. I was let go from the developmental program in OVW, and next thing you know, I had an opportunity to go there and earn a spot, and he gave me that chance, and I found myself going back, every month.
What was the gimmick really supposed to be? Just you're the Predator. You're basically an homage to Bruce Brody's son, or
what's the gimmick?
Well, I go back and I still think about it. I look and see some of the original Bruiser Brody matches and different things, and what he was doing and everything. And obviously in Japan, it was much, much bigger. Obviously he, scared the fans, and he went out there, and it was just pretty much a paying homage to him. I wasn't trying to be his son. I wasn't trying to be something different. And much like a lot of other, popular things, whether you're talking about the Dynamite Kids or the Tiger Mask or all these different things, the people that have been honored to go under this mask or that mask or whatever, the third or the fourth or the fifth person, I tried to, bring some of that back. I knew I wasn't going to do it exactly the way he did it. I was hoping that maybe I was bringing a little bit more athleticism to it, but that's what I thought at the time. But I did win the most. I was voted the most popular wrestler. When I was having my feud with Nagoya Ogawa. So, and that was that was pro wrestling and fighting. So. I think what they wanted to do and how they protected me and how they put it over and everything, the interviews and the stuff, the way that I got to, kind of get Ogawa and, in different times and ambush him and do these underhanded things amongst having, underhanded referees and the whole spiel, there was a really big buildup for it, and it was great to work that angle, that feud with them. It was one of the highlights of my career right there. Is just the way they built it up and what the payoff was.
Legit shooter too.
Interesting.
That I guess that's the style.
He was a silver medalist in the Olympics.
That's the style they love, though, right? The legit shooters, they can work a little stiff. Right?
That's what they love over there.
They do like that, yes, absolutely.
Did you enjoy that style?
I did. You learn to do it, and it's. I think as a big guy, you have to do it. I don't care if you're talking about here or over there or anything. You can't. You have to. I think you have to lay things in pretty good and be pretty physical and they get behind it, that sort of thing. It's, but the hard thing about it is when you come over here, there's a lot of people that will get on you for being a little stiff and working that way. But, whenever a big guy, if you throw the punch and it's, not making good contact or anything, it's not going to look well, that sort of thing. And I know that, people, the big guys get criticized, but, you have to do it, and the ones that get more pop and everything, no one says nothing because they're afraid to. But it's whenever you're the guy on the bottom of the totem pole, then everybody cries bloody murder. But I haven't hurt anybody. There's nobody that's got injured from what I did. So, that's something that I take a lot of pride in, and so you go out there, what you're supposed to do. They know what I'm supposed to do. And, if you're a young boy, I mean, you're going to take a little bit of the beating or whatever, but, it's the same thing with the gal. I mean, I give as good as I get, so to speak. So when it's their time to get me and, to throw me on my head or whatever it is, I reciprocate and, and I take, get as good as I get, so to speak. So you give and, they get you, it comes their time. So it's, you just got to be ready for it. But as long as it's understood, it's not a problem.
So how do you get into K1?
That was an interesting situation that Rick Bassman had come up with, and they were interested in me and Tom Howard at the time. I mean, obviously we were portrayed as very strong over there, and then they offered us a fight, each of us to work the New Year's Eve show, which was the biggest shows at the time. You had Inoki had his group. There was K1 and there was Pride, and that was the biggest time of fighting. Those were the biggest shows, and so the biggest followings, and did the best TV ratings. And so I had an opportunity to. I was going to fight a kickboxer, and he pulled out, and I fought another gentleman instead from Brazil, and I knocked him out in like 16 seconds. So I got a developmental deal after that. But it was interesting. I had to go back and start training like I was an amateur wrestling again. I had to really work on my stand-up and have to do that whole thing. So all of a sudden you're a pro wrestler. All of a sudden now you're training for your first fight, and then all of a sudden now you get a contract. Now you're a fighter now. So it ended up being interesting because K1 had a pro wrestling group called Wrestle One, and I got to do some shows for that. So they would bring me over there and pay me to do still some pro wrestling shows for them. But, all of a sudden you go from worrying about pro wrestling to, trying to get yourself into shape and trying to get yourself ready to do mixed martial arts.
When you do that, is it weird kind of going back and forth doing both? Is it hard on you and hard on your
body? The transition is very hard for pro wrestling, especially whenever I decided to do that and I had that opportunity. I was already like 32 years old. So a 32-year-old pro wrestler trying to go in and do mixed martial arts. And then eventually I had to do some stand-up fights, some K1 style fights. Going back to pro wrestling, I mean, when you're training and then all of a sudden you realize you haven't done a pro wrestling match in, 4 months or something like that, it's a little bit strange. To do that, timing and what you're wanting to accomplish and everything like that it's a little bit off. But you have to, if you're getting paid good money to fight, you gotta give it your all in that direction. You can't kind of be like half a pro wrestler and half a pro fighter. That's not going to work. I had to get in better shape. And obviously, fighting shape's a little bit different than pro wrestling shape, even though pro wrestling can wear you out too in its own way. But, if you get gassed out when you're fighting, then that's not too good. That ends up, only bad things come as a result of that.
What did you think of being in there with Gary Goodrich, who's a huge veteran? And it's just kind of your second fight. It's kind of crazy.
It's kind of crazy.
Well, it's interesting. That was one of my worst fights in terms of strategy. What I should have did is just take him down. That wouldn't have been a problem. But there was something I had been doing better in my sparring. I was fighting, I was sparring with the likes of, Mighty Mo, who was in K1. He was he's top 8, had won that. And I felt like I was learning, coming on good. For whatever reason possessed me that I thought I could stand with Gary, for a longer period of time instead of just, going and taking him down like I did my previous fight with Christophe Midot. I should have did that, and it would have been a different outcome, but I didn't. And, I stood there and, opened myself up and took a nice one on the chin, and that was it. So, that was one of my, it was one of those things where, I had talked to him later on, and he goes, he was a boxing champion, and he, for Canada, and, and it's kind of, I don't know what I was thinking, that, someone that had one pro fight was going to go in there and feel as though that he could just stand and do everything with somebody that probably had several dozen fights, but I did, and I paid for it, but I did come back and win my next fight. So when I went to Korea against a guy that was 5-1 in Pride, so I won that fight. But yeah, the one with Gary Goodrich, I still scratch my head on that one. That wasn't one of my best efforts.
And even your kickboxing fight, they throw you to the dogs. I mean, crazy. They just throw you in there, Bojanski and Hangman Choi. Right.
Right.
Well, they probably don't think of it that way. They think of it as, oh, well, that would be an interesting matchup that fans would like to see. What would this big wrestler do if he has to fight, stand-up style against a top flight kickboxer? But I was very proud of my fight with Remy. He didn't kick me in the head and knock me out. I stayed with him. I felt I had a pretty good show of myself. If anybody wants to watch that, I'll watch 3 rounds and tell me what 2 out of 3 rounds he won. I'd be surprised. I felt as though it was pretty clear I won the first 2, but I think that there's a little bit of politics involved with something like that too. But I was very proud of my effort with him. Hangman Choi, I got caught, as they say. Everybody has a plan until you get hit, and found myself above my eye was split open, but I finished strong. I felt as though I was coming back and starting to get the better of them, and I, as they say, I just wasn't ahead when time ran out. So, but yeah, they'll throw you up against anybody. I mean, you have a contract, and they figure, oh well, this is a good matchup and what people would like to see, and would make money. And so I ended up finding myself doing stand-up fights. Pretty surprised, but I did it, and I was proud of my effort in those exchanges. But to be honest, I got paid pretty well to do those things. I was making in one fight what I'd make in 1 year to do pro wrestling was 0-1. So I did them and just did my best. And like I said, I never had any smokers, no little fights. My first stand-up fight was against, at the time, the 2-time, World Grand Prix champion for K1, Remy Benjaski, and then the other guy I fought was about 7 inches taller than me and about 70 more pounds. And, I was used to having the reach advantage whenever I sparred, pretty much, and I was turned on my head on that one. He had the reach advantage and the size advantage and the height advantage and that sort of thing. So, and he was someone who's, made it into the K1 tournament also. So, so it wasn't like, they didn't start you off with anybody that was just even mediocre, went right to the top.
So, MMA, kickboxing, you're making a huge name for yourself in Japan. You're still doing a little bit of stuff at UPW. You're still doing a little bit of stuff with like Hustle and AAA in Japan. How do you get back to WWE?
Well, it was interesting. I and you'd have to probably ask them this, but for whatever reason, they were interested in me, and they were waiting for my contract to be done and up and everything, and they gave me an opportunity to come back, and they signed me back. Fought in April with Hongman Choi in Las Vegas, and about the middle of the next month, I was already signed to WWE, back with them. So they were kind of waiting, which was interesting. Because I really hadn't done much pro wrestling in 2.5 years, but I had an opportunity to re-sign with them, and I did. And I was with them for probably about 9 months, and then obviously I got let go again. In the beginning of January, and I saw it coming. That sort of thing. But at the time, I just didn't feel as though there was a whole lot I could do about it. You were brought in to work with certain people and, a certain person and get a push and everything of that nature. And it didn't work out that way. So there it is. And so you get the old, you got to go get more experience, or you got to go do this or go do that. And, figured, well, at that time, 30, 35 years old, I figured, well, move back at home. I'm not planning on, doing a whole nother go around of this thing. If that's the way it is, that's the way it is.
Who were you supposed to work with?
Well, they had, and Elijah Burke had mentioned this and everything in some of his interviews. However, I was supposed to do a program with Batista and the Undertaker, and that did not end up happening. And those are long stories in of themselves. Whenever I had confronted the Undertaker, Mark, about we were supposed to start a program in the Philippines. All of a sudden, I got taken off the card, and I already had my passport and all that stuff, ready to go, and everything was ready. And then all of a sudden, last minute, I was taken off. He said that he had better matches with smaller guys, so there was that. But unfortunately, sometimes it just doesn't always work out the way you want it to.
With that, though, is that him squashing it? Does Vince say anything? Does Vince say anything or no?
Well, that's a hard thing, because there's probably more people, usually whenever I find out things, I'm usually, as they say, the last one to know. You hear the rumors. You go back 6 months later and someone says, hey, you really need to, go up to Mark and make it right. And you're thinking like, well, make what right? Or, certain things of that nature. And then they tell you, or they tell you what, Vince said, or why you got fired the first time and everything. And so, I had a match with Kurt Angle, and I went and did a move off the top rope. And it's like, well, when Vince saw that you went to the top rope, he lost a lot of faith in you or whatever. And I found that out like 2 or 3 years later. And I'm thinking to myself, well, why didn't somebody just tell me? Why didn't he tell, Jim Cornette or Danny Davis, say, hey, don't let him go do anything. He's a gorilla acting like a chimpanzee, so to speak, but you find these things out later on. So, and usually it's about 6 months later, I kind of found out that, for some reason that, the Undertaker had felt disrespected on something that I did to him or whatever. And, a lot of people are like, well, we really feel about what happened. And, we heard you're a good guy and this and that. You need to go make it right with them. And you're like, okay. And you just listen and you hear them tell these things. And it's people that you don't even know, that were with, Monday Night Raw, and they're coming up to you and you're telling these things, but like, they don't want him to know that they told you these things. So, but you find these things out later on and you're like, okay, now it's starting to make sense and the pieces are starting to come together. Because what happens is you go home and you get back on Tuesday. Thursday morning, you get a call from John Laurinaitis, and it's like, well, I got bad news for you. We're going to have to let you go. That sort of thing. You need to get more experience and, this and that. And you never really get like a reason. But yet you find us out, 6 months later, a year later, that maybe you were a little bit too stiff, or you felt disrespected in some way, or whatnot. But that's neither here nor there. It's just it happened. You find out, and you're like, well, all right, well, it happened. There's nothing I could do to make it right. You try, and nobody said, hey, come on back for another match, or hey, let's do this. Hey, we think we could use you and make a lot of money with you, that sort of thing. And so you just drift away. That's what I did.
When you look at it, though,
anything to that contrary as far as
I don't remember you ever losing.
I don't remember you ever losing a match on TV.
That was interesting. That was I had several segments, and a lot of segments were short segments. It was where they're trying to build you up and that sort of thing. And you have matches against the Scotty Two Hotties and the Matt Hardys and the different things. But I had several good segments where Vince was there, and he had complimented me pretty highly on you were out there slinging some really good stuff, and that wasn't exact words, but and was very happy. And I had people like Arn Anderson come up to me and say, how'd you feel about that? I said, I felt pretty good about it. He goes, well, Vince was really happy about that. He liked this and that or whatever like that. So there were things that I did that got a lot of good response, and I kind of felt like, well, what they had given me so far, I did well with. Why wouldn't you give me a chance to maybe take that next step and see what I could do with it? But that didn't happen. So, like I said, I went from having some good segments. I think they looked good I think they translated well. It came across what they wanted to do. I thought there was a lot of potential there. But in the end, for whatever reason, they felt as though I still had not enough experience and to do what they wanted to do. And, that's, I can't argue with that because, they know what they want, and either you translate, you take the bull by the horns and you make it, or you don't. And if you don't, then you kind of, you're not going to be there for too long. So, that's how I see it.
When you look at it, you're
undefeated on TV. On ECW, even then,
Elijah Burke,
or a team.
Tap out,
knockout connection.
And then you guys are still undefeated.
So it's just weird.
Usually, you kind of like bury the guy or whatever.
So they obviously thought something of you.
Well, that was a hard thing too. They couldn't figure out what they wanted me to do. At first, it was me coming out and Elijah being my manager, and then it came out, and then they wanted me to be his bodyguard, and then they wanted us to be a tag team, and then they went back to him being, my manager again. So it was a weird time that they had just started some contracts with the CW and different things, and it was like they never really came out and we got a push. I felt as though we did maybe one or two interviews, and that was about it. We didn't really get to say a whole lot, do a whole lot, and everything. We came out, I won my matches. I helped Elijah win his matches. We were undefeated as a tag team. And then, all of a sudden, they decide, oh, well, we're going to go and lose to the Hardy Boys. And then after that, that was it. So that was a strange thing. I don't think that, even Stephanie, when she saw it, she's like, why are we having these guys lose? Why would we have them lose, and everything? Well, that's because we, getting ready to break us up, and obviously Elijah stayed on and did well for himself, but I was getting ready to get let go, so that's what happens.
Right, you lose to the Hardys, but
But you
then you
lose
beat
to the
the
Hardys, but then
FBI
you
on
beat the
pay-per-view, and then
FBI
you
on
beat the
pay-per-view,
FAI
and
on
then you beat
TV.
the FAI
So
on
it's almost
TV.
like, okay, maybe
So it's
they're
almost
building
like,
towards
okay, maybe
something,
they're building towards something,
and then no, you're gone.
and then no, you're gone.
Well, as they say, hope springs eternal. Even at that time where things, you're not being used a lot on television, and you're not really getting to work with anybody new. I had worked with a great guy. I worked with Tatanka that summer and everything, but they never did anything with the angle. They didn't build it up. They didn't build the matches up or anything of that nature. So you did house shows with them, and you learned and everything of that nature, but it didn't translate to anything on TV. So I was just I felt like I was just adrift, on an island, trying to wait to see, well, when's my shot going to be, my opportunity going to come? And I don't think that it ever really did. As far as getting to work with the top names, that sort of thing. So, I was sitting there hoping that, well, sooner or later, they're going to see something. They're going to give me my shot. They're going to let me work this. We're going to start this program. And then obviously, whenever I didn't have the opportunity to go start that in the Philippines with the Undertaker and start, doing something with them, I knew that my time was short, because Batista was already working, with someone. He was working with Booker T, and whenever I noticed that the Undertaker started working, the angle with Mr. Kennedy, and so, well, where am I going to fit into this thing? Who am I going to, they brought me in there to work with these guys. Who am I going to work with? So,
any heat with you and Undertaker?
Any heat with you and Undertaker?
I don't know if I'd call it heat. I mean, if a guy says he didn't want to work with me, now I don't know what his exact words are. I'm not going to put words in anybody's mouth or whatever like that. I don't know why he didn't want to. I think that I'd worked with a lot of big guys in Japan and in the States and whatnot, and had good matches. I think I would have had a great match with them, but it is what it is. I'm not going to say anything bad about him. It's just, I don't feel as though that he did want to work with me. And I think that was unfortunate. I think it could have been a good draw. I think it could have made good money. I think it would have been a good thing for my career, but I'm not going to put words in his mouth. No, I don't have heat with him. It's a long time ago. It's it's 20 years ago, basically. Almost. So, what are you going to do? It's sometimes hard. I think the big man category. I think there's only so much room at the top for only so many of them. That's my opinion. You have room for one or two in each of the shows, SmackDown, Raw. At the time I was there, they had ECW. They actually had 3, and then unfortunately, when ECW wasn't doing that well, they condensed it. ECW with SmackDown, and so all of a sudden now you went from needing maybe 60 wrestlers to needing 40 wrestlers. So, it's a little bit of a bad timing thing right there. And, unfortunately, I didn't make that cut.
As we head towards the wind down,
head towards the finish
any regrets in the wrestling business? Do you wish you stayed around longer?
Do you wish you stayed around longer? Do you wish you did something else? Any regrets?
Well, that's a hard thing. I sit there and say, well, if I wanted, did the pro fighting, and stayed in there, maybe I would have been better prepared. Or maybe if I was said, hey, maybe I should go back to, OVW for 2 or 3 months and get that wrestling timing back, get everything back before you go, but jump right into WWE. There's a lot of woulda, coulda, shouldas, that sort of thing, but it worked out. I have faith that it worked out a certain way for a certain reason. Obviously there's certain endeavors I would have liked to have been a little bit more successful in. Obviously, I would have loved to have been a mainstay in WWE, but there's no regrets. It works out. You're in and out of things. You do what you can at the time. You make the best choice as to what you think is your best move, what makes sense, what's the best opportunity, and you go with it. Whatever happens after that, there's no sense in going back and trying to second guess it or wonder, well, if I would have did this differently like that, because it doesn't help anything. I have faith that everything that I did worked out the way it was. I was blessed to have had good friends, good teachers, got to work with Rick Bassman, people, look out for me, and people I came across and helped me and helped get me opportunities. So I've had the opportunities. I don't feel bad. I did the best with what I could at the time. I did have the opportunities and, got to step on the stage, and I'm thankful for it. And so it is. And, I'm not going to second guess it. Things happen, sometimes good and sometimes bad, but overall, I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't trade it for a second.
What's next for you?
Anything sort of wrestling related or MMA related, as far as
more interviews or something like that? Like as far as
documentaries or nothing as far as that front.
I don't see any of that taking place. I'm a married man, just been married about 14 months now. So, just working on the home, marriage, my job, that type of stuff. I don't see myself getting back into any of the entertainment aspects myself. I am 52 right now. Just looking to do what I do. I think I do all right, but I don't see. I've obviously, the fighting, acting, the mixed martial arts, pro wrestling. That's a young man's sport anymore. And I was thankful I got into it a little bit late, my late 20s, and I got to work with a lot of people, meet a lot of great people. Eat off a lot of plates, go all around the world. It's taken me. So I have a lot of good stories. I've enjoyed it and met a lot of people, good friends as a result, that sort of thing. So, I have my memories, most of it good, most all of it good. And so, and I'm just going to sit there and be thankful for it. Be thankful for all that happened.
Great career, obviously.
In Japan, though, a lot, which is
very reminiscent of
Bruiser Brody, of course, too.
Yes.
Where can everybody find
you?
Do you do social media?
Do you social media? Do you promote yourself or anything, or no?
No, never been good at that. I've never been a big self-promoter. I've never been at venues selling my pictures or charging. I think I did one thing of a promotion one time where I was brought in to sign pictures or something like that for a certain amount of money. But no, I'm not a big social media type of person, very private. Everything that I did was, back between 1999 and pretty much 2000 and 2007, with a little bit, doing some pro wrestling matches for Antonio Inoki and Inoki Genomi Federation for a couple of years. But by 2011, I was done. I was ready to walk away from it, and I did completely. So, that's one of those things. I'm not trying to stay relevant. I came, I had my time, had my fun, and quite happy with where I'm at right now.
You ever intimidate anybody?
I'd be like, oh my god, it's the Predator.
No, I'm not allowed to do that. I have to be professional and everything. So, I smile. I try to use my product knowledge. Try to show them a good product. Show good value, build value in myself, my product, the dealership I work at, and we just go from there. So that's pretty simple.
All right, Sylvester, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for all the time today. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you for having me on. Great to talk with you.